The bullet missed Catherine Walker by inches, splintering the wooden post beside her head as she stumbled through the saloon doors into the dusty street of Westcliffe, Colorado. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she ran, the hem of her green traveling dress catching on the rough planks of the boardwalk. Behind her, she heard the angry shouts of the men who had been following her since she fled Denver 3 days ago. The September sun beat down mercilessly on the small mining town, and Catherine's lungs burned as she searched desperately for somewhere, anywhere, to hide. She had never imagined her life would come to this. Just 2 weeks ago, she had been living quietly in Denver, working as a schoolteacher, minding her own business. Then she had witnessed something she should not have seen. Through the window of the assayer's office, late one evening, she had watched 4 men murder the assayer in cold blood, stealing bags of gold dust and claim papers. They had been careless, laughing as they committed their crime, and one of them had looked up at exactly the wrong moment, locking eyes with her through the glass. She had run then too, but not fast enough. They knew her face, and worse, they knew her name. The leader, a cruel man named Marcus Denton, had connections throughout the territory. He had made it clear through threats delivered to her boarding house that she would not live to testify about what she had seen. Catherine had left Denver in the middle of the night with only the clothes on her back and what little money she had saved. She had hoped to reach her aunt in Santa Fe, but Denton's men had tracked her relentlessly. Now, exhausted and terrified, she found herself in Westcliffe with nowhere left to run. The town was small, perhaps 200 souls if that. Main Street consisted of a general store, a saloon, a small church, a blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses. Mountains rose dramatically on all sides, their peaks still touched with snow even in early autumn. It was beautiful country, but Catherine had no time to appreciate it. She darted between 2 buildings, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, boots thundered on the wooden walkway. There were 3 of them this time, all of Denton's hired guns. She recognized their voices calling out to each other as they searched for her. The narrow alley led to a sprawling meadow dotted with cabins and small homesteads. Catherine ran toward the nearest cabin, a sturdy log structure with smoke rising from its chimney. She did not know who lived there and had no time to consider whether they might help her. All she knew was that she needed shelter, needed safety, needed someone to protect her from the men who wanted her dead. She practically threw herself at the door, pounding on it with both fists. "Please," she cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, someone help me. They are going to kill me." For a terrible moment, there was no response. Catherine could hear the men emerging from the alley behind her. Then the door swung open, and she found herself looking up at the tallest man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble. His eyes were a startling gray, like storm clouds, and they assessed her with an intensity that made her catch her breath. He wore simple clothes, buckskin pants and a worn cotton shirt, and his dark hair hung past his collar. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, and there was something dangerous in the way he held himself, like a wolf deciding whether to attack or retreat. "Help me," Catherine whispered, and then her legs gave out. The man caught her before she hit the ground, his arms surprisingly gentle despite his obvious strength. He pulled her inside the cabin and shut the door with his boot, settling her into a chair near the fireplace. Catherine tried to speak to warn him about the men, but he pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to be quiet. A moment later, heavy fists pounded on the door. "Open up," a rough voice demanded. "We are looking for a woman, dark hair, green dress." She is a criminal, and we are bringing her to justice." The man who had given Catherine shelter did not answer immediately. Instead, he moved to a cabinet and removed a gun belt, strapping it around his hips with practiced ease. The revolver that hung from the belt looked well used but well maintained. Only then did he open the door, but just a crack, his large frame blocking any view into the cabin. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" His voice was deep and calm, with a slight drawl that suggested he had spent time in the South. "We are tracking a woman," one of the men said. "She is wanted for theft in Denver. Seen her around here." "I have been hunting all day," the man replied. "Just got back about an hour ago, have not seen anyone." Catherine held her breath, pressing herself back into the chair as if she could somehow become invisible. Through the crack in the door, she could see one of the men trying to peer past her protector. "Mind if we take a look inside?" the man asked, his tone making it clear it was not really a request. "Yes, I do mind." The frontiersman's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. "This is my home, and I do not take kindly to strangers demanding to enter it." "Now listen here," one of the other men started, but the frontiersman cut him off. "No, you listen. I do not know anything about your business in Denver, and frankly, I do not care. What I do know is that you are on my property making demands. In these parts, that is a good way to get shot." He shifted slightly, and Catherine saw his hand rest on the butt of his revolver. "Now, I have told you I have not seen your woman. I suggest you move along and search elsewhere." The men muttered among themselves. Catherine could feel her heart pounding so hard she was sure they must be able to hear it. Finally, one of them spoke up. "We will be watching. If we find out you are hiding her, there will be trouble." "I will keep that in mind," the frontiersman said dryly. He closed the door firmly and slid a heavy wooden bar across it, locking it in place. For a long moment, he stood with his back to Catherine, his hand still resting on his gun. She studied him in the firelight, noticing details she had missed before. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who worked hard and lived rough. There was a knife sheathed at his belt, and she could see the stock of a rifle mounted above the door. When he finally turned to face her, his gray eyes were unreadable. "You want to tell me what is really going on?" he asked. "Because those men did not strike me as lawmen, and you do not look like a thief." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but she forced them back. She had cried enough over the past 3 days. "My name is Catherine Walker," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am not a criminal. I am a school teacher from Denver. 2 weeks ago, I witnessed a murder. The men who killed him, they saw me. Their leader, Marcus Denton, he has sent men after me to make sure I cannot testify. Those 3 outside, they are hired guns. They have been chasing me for days." The frontiersman listened without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, carefully edging the curtain aside to look out. "They are still out there," he said, "watching the cabin from across the way." He let the curtain fall back and turned to her. "My name is Owen Ramsey. I have lived in these mountains for the past 5 years, mostly keeping to myself. I trap, hunt, do some guide work when I need extra money." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I do not involve myself in other people's troubles as a rule, but I also do not take kindly to men who hunt women like animals." "I have nowhere else to go," Catherine said quietly. "My aunt lives in Santa Fe, but I will never make it there with those men following me. I do not have enough money to hire protection, and I do not know anyone in this territory. I just need somewhere safe to stay until I can figure out what to do." Owen crossed his arms over his chest, still studying her with those intense gray eyes. "If those men work for Marcus Denton, you are in serious trouble. I have heard of him. He has connections with some of the rougher elements in Denver, politicians in his pocket, lawmen who look the other way. Even if you make it to Santa Fe, he will find you. Catherine felt her brief hope crumbling. So what am I supposed to do? Just wait for them to kill me? I did not say that. Owen moved to the fireplace and added another log, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. But you need to understand what you are asking. If I shelter you, those men will come back and they will bring more with them. It will not be a matter of turning you away at the door next time. There will be violence. I cannot ask you to risk your life for me, Catherine said, even though the thought of leaving the safety of this cabin filled her with terror. You do not know me. You have no reason to help me. Owen turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw something soften in his expression. My mother was murdered when I was 15 years old, he said quietly. 3 men broke into our home in Missouri while my father and I were in town. When we returned, she was dead. The sheriff said there was nothing he could do, that the men had moved on and we would never find them. His jaw tightened. My father died 2 years later, still searching for them. So you see, Miss Walker, I do have a reason to help you. I know what it is like to be powerless against men who think they can take whatever they want. Catherine felt tears slip down her cheeks despite her best efforts. Thank you, she whispered. Owen cleared his throat, looking suddenly uncomfortable with the emotion in the room. You can sleep in the bed, he said, gesturing to a simple frame bed in the corner. I will take the floor. Tomorrow we will figure out a plan, but tonight you need to rest. You look like you have not slept in days. I have not, Catherine admitted. She had been too terrified to do more than doze fitfully, always expecting to wake to rough hands dragging her from whatever shelter she had found. Owen moved about the cabin, checking the windows and door, making sure everything was secure. Catherine watched him, noting the efficiency of his movements, the way he seemed completely at home in this rough dwelling. The cabin was sparse but clean, with animal pelts on the floor and walls, basic furniture that looked handmade, and shelves holding supplies and tools. It was the home of a man who valued function over comfort, who had stripped his life down to essentials. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash, Owen said, gesturing to a small table near the bed. I am afraid I do not have much in the way of women's clothing, but I can lend you a clean shirt if you want to get out of that dress. Catherine looked down at herself and realized her dress was torn and filthy from 3 days of hard travel. That would be kind, thank you. Owen pulled a shirt from a trunk and handed it to her, then politely turned his back while she changed. The shirt hung nearly to her knees and smelled of wood smoke and pine, oddly comforting. She washed her face and hands, the cool water a blessing against her skin. When she settled onto the bed, the soft furs beneath her felt like heaven after nights spent sleeping on the hard ground. Owen banked the fire and made himself a pallet on the floor near the door, positioning himself between her and any potential threat. Owen, Catherine said into the darkness. Yes. Why do you live out here alone? You seem like someone who could make a good living in town. There was a long silence, and she thought perhaps he would not answer. Then his deep voice came through the darkness. I tried living in town for a while after my father died, but I found I did not fit there anymore. Too many people, too much noise. Out here, things are simpler. A man is judged by his actions, not his words. The mountains do not lie to you. You never get lonely. Another pause. Sometimes, but loneliness is better than being surrounded by people who do not understand you. Catherine thought about that as she drifted towards sleep, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. Her last conscious thought was that Owen Ramsey was unlike any man she had ever met, and she was grateful beyond words that she had stumbled to his door. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Morning light streamed through the cabin's small windows, and for a disoriented moment, Catherine could not remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back, and she sat up quickly, looking around for Owen. He was at the fireplace, tending a skillet. He had shaved and changed his shirt, and his dark hair was damp, suggesting he had washed at the creek she could hear babbling somewhere nearby. He looked over his shoulder as she stirred. "Morning," he said. "Hope you are hungry. We need to talk strategy, and that is best done on a full stomach." Catherine rose and accepted the plate he handed her, along with a cup of strong black coffee. The food was simple but good, and she realized she had barely eaten in days. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Owen set down his plate and fixed her with a serious look. "I have been thinking about your situation," he said. "Those men are not going to give up. Even if they leave Westcliffe temporarily, they will be back, and they will bring reinforcements. Marcus Denton has a reputation to maintain. If word gets out that a witness escaped him, it will make him look weak." "I know," Catherine said quietly. "So we have two choices. One, we try to get you out of the territory entirely. Head west to California or north into Wyoming, somewhere Denton's influence does not reach. Two, we find a way to neutralize the threat permanently." "How would we do that?" Owen's expression was grim. "We would need evidence of Denton's crimes, enough to bring in federal marshals. If we can prove he has been operating a criminal enterprise, ordering murders, his political connections would not be enough to save him. But that would require you testifying, and it would be dangerous." Catherine set down her cup, her hands trembling slightly. "I have been running scared for so long," she said. "Part of me wants to just keep running, to disappear somewhere he will never find me. But another part of me thinks about that poor man who was murdered, about his family who will never see justice. If I run, Denton wins. He gets to keep killing and stealing, and nothing changes. Testifying would put an even bigger target on your back," Owen warned. "Until Denton is actually arrested and tried, you would be in constant danger. But you said you would not turn me away." Catherine looked at him, this stranger who had already risked so much for her. "Did you mean it? If I decide to stay and fight, will you help me?" Owen held her gaze, and she saw something shift in those gray eyes, a decision being made. "I do not know you well, Catherine Walker," he said slowly. "But I see courage in you. You ran because you had to, but you are not a coward. If you want to stand and fight, then yes, I will help you. Anyone who threatens you will have to go through me first." The fierce conviction in his voice made Catherine's breath catch. She had been alone for so long, fighting this terror by herself. Having someone stand with her, promise to protect her, it made something tight in her chest loosen. "Then I want to fight," she said. "I want Marcus Denton to face justice for what he has done." Owen nodded once, decisively. "All right then. First thing we need to do is get word to the federal marshal in Denver. There is a telegraph office in Westcliffe. I will go into town and send a message, see if we can get someone out here to take your statement. In the meantime, you will stay here. The cabin is defensible, and I have enough supplies to last several weeks if necessary. But those men, they will be watching for you. What if they follow you? Let them try." Owen's smile was not pleasant. "I know these mountains better than anyone. If they come after me, they will regret it." After breakfast, Owen prepared to head into town. He loaded his revolver and rifle, checking each weapon with the care of a man whose life depended on them. Catherine watched him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and guilt. This man owed her nothing, yet he was putting himself in danger for her sake. "Owen," she said as he reached for his hat, "why are you really doing this? You said you knew what it was like to be powerless, but there must be more to it than that. You could have turned me away last night and no one would have blamed you." Owen paused, his hand on the door latch. He was quiet for so long that Catherine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Because when I saw you at my door, terrified and desperate, I saw my mother. I was not there to protect her, but I am here now. Maybe I cannot change the past, but I can damn sure change what happens next." He left before Catherine could respond, slipping out the door and disappearing into the trees with a woodsman's silence. She watched through the window as he moved through the forest, noting how he seemed to become part of the landscape, blending into the shadows and foliage. Within moments, he was gone, as if he had never been there at all. Catherine spent the morning tidying the cabin, needing something to occupy her hands and mind. She found a broom and swept the floor, organized the shelves, and mended a tear in one of the blankets using a needle and thread she found in Owen's supply box. It felt strange to be doing such domestic tasks in the home of a man she barely knew, but it also felt good to be useful, to do something other than run and hide. As she worked, she thought about Owen Ramsey. He was an enigma, this quiet frontiersman who lived alone in the mountains. There was a gentleness in him. She had seen it in the way he had caught her when she fell, in the way he had given her his bed and turned his back while she changed. But there was also a hardness, a capacity for violence that lurked just beneath the surface. She had seen it in his eyes when he confronted the men at his door, in the casual way he wore his weapons as if they were extensions of his body. She wondered what his life had been like before he came to these mountains, what he had seen and done in the years since his parents died. He could not be much older than 30, yet he carried himself with the weary experience of someone much older. The wilderness had marked him, shaped him into something both dangerous and protective. Hours passed. Catherine made stew from the supplies in the cabin, letting it simmer over the fire. She kept watch at the window, her heart jumping at every sound. What if something had happened to Owen? What if Denton's men had captured him, or worse? But as the sun began its descent behind the mountains, she saw him emerge from the trees, moving with that same silent grace. Relief flooded through her, and she realized with surprise how worried she had been. She barely knew this man, yet the thought of something happening to him had filled her with genuine fear. Owen entered the cabin and immediately secured the door behind him. He looked tired but unharmed. "The message is sent," he said. "The telegraph operator said he would mark it urgent. With luck, we should hear back from the marshal within a few days. Did you see those men in town?" "Oh, I saw them. They were asking questions, showing people a description of you." Most folks were not interested in helping them, though. Westcliffe is a small town, and people here are wary of strangers, especially ones who come in making demands. He hung up his hat and gun belt, then paused, sniffing the air. "Is that stew?" Catherine felt herself blush slightly. "I hope you do not mind. I needed something to do, and I thought you might be hungry when you got back." Owen's expression softened in a way that transformed his weathered face. "Mind? Miss Walker, I have been eating my own cooking for 5 years. Having someone make me a meal is a gift." He moved to the table and sat down heavily, and Catherine noticed for the first time the lines of fatigue around his eyes. She ladled stew into bowls and they ate together, the cabin warm and cozy as darkness fell outside. It struck Catherine how intimate this was, sharing a meal she had prepared in his home, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. If anyone from Denver could see her now, unchaperoned with a man she barely knew, they would be scandalized. But nothing about her current situation was conventional, and somehow, here in this rough cabin with this rough man, she felt safer than she had in years. "Tell me about your life in Denver," Owen said between bites. "You said you were a school teacher." "Yes, for 3 years. I taught reading and arithmetic to children ages 6 to 12. It was challenging work, but rewarding. Some of those children came from families that could barely afford to send them, but they were so eager to learn. She smiled, remembering. There was one boy, Samuel, who could barely write his own name when he started. By the end of the year, he was reading entire books. That is what I loved about teaching, seeing that moment when something clicks in a child's mind, and they realize they can do something they thought was impossible. Sounds like important work. It felt important to me. My parents died when I was young, and education was what lifted me out of poverty. I wanted to give that same opportunity to others. Catherine's smile faded. Now I do not know if I will ever be able to teach again. Even if we stop Denton, my reputation will be ruined. What school will hire a woman who has been at the center of a murder scandal? Owen set down his spoon and looked at her steadily. A scandal caused by your bravery and integrity, you mean? Anyone who judges you for doing the right thing is a fool. His words warmed her more than the fire. Thank you for saying that. They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing more easily than Catherine would have expected. Owen told her about his life in the mountains, about tracking elk through winter snows, about the summer he had worked as a guide for a group of surveyors mapping the region. He spoke little about his past before Colorado, and Catherine did not press him, sensing that those memories were still painful. In turn, she told him about growing up in St. Louis, about the aunt who had raised her after her parents' death, about her decision to head west seeking opportunity and adventure. I wanted to see the frontier, she said with a rueful laugh. I wanted excitement. I suppose I should be careful what I wish for. Excitement is overrated, Owen said dryly. Give me a quiet day in the mountains any time. As the night grew late, they prepared for sleep with the same arrangement as the night before. But this time, as Catherine settled into the bed, she felt a strange reluctance to close her eyes, not from fear but from a desire to keep talking to Owen, to learn more about this fascinating, complex man who had become her protector. Catherine. Owen's voice came from his pallet by the door. Yes, I want you to know no matter what happens, I will not let them take you. I have made that choice and I stand by it. Even if it costs you everything. I do not have much to lose. This cabin, my solitude, that is all I have. And suddenly that does not seem as important as it did yesterday. Catherine's heart fluttered in her chest. She wanted to ask what he meant, but she was afraid of the answer, or perhaps afraid that she already knew. Instead, she simply said, "Good night, Owen." "Good night, Catherine." The next few days fell into a pattern. Owen would scout the surrounding area each morning and evening, checking for signs of Denton's men. During the day, Catherine continued to make herself useful around the cabin, cooking, mending, organizing. They talked constantly, sharing stories and opinions, finding surprising common ground despite their different backgrounds. Catherine learned that Owen had fought in the war, though he never said which side and she did not ask. She learned that he loved poetry, surprising given his rough exterior, and had a battered volume of Wordsworth that he read by firelight. She learned that he was patient and thoughtful, that he considered his words carefully before speaking, and that when he smiled, truly smiled, it transformed his entire face. Owen learned that Catherine had a quick wit and sharp mind, that she was not afraid of hard work or rough conditions. He learned that she sang softly to herself while cooking, old folk songs her mother had taught her. He learned that she was brave in ways both large and small, facing her fear each day while refusing to let it paralyze her. On the fourth day, everything changed. Owen returned from his morning scout with a grim expression. "We have company," he said. "Two men camping about a mile north watching the approaches to the cabin. They are not trying very hard to hide themselves. Do you think they are Denton's men?" "No question." They want us to know they are there. They are trying to rattle us, make us nervous enough to make a mistake." Owen checked his weapons, his movements sharp with controlled anger. "What they do not realize is that they have made a mistake coming into my mountains. What are you going to do?" "I am going to have a conversation with them, make it clear that they need to leave." Catherine grabbed his arm as he moved toward the door. "Owen, please be careful. There are 2 of them and they will be armed." He covered her hand with his own, and the warmth of his calloused palm against her skin sent a jolt through her. "I will be careful," he promised. "But Catherine, if I do not come back in 2 hours, there is a horse in the lean-to behind the cabin. Take it and ride south towards Silver Cliff. There is a rancher there named Thomas Green. Tell him Owen Ramsey sent you and he will help you." "I am not leaving you," Catherine said fiercely. "If you are going to face those men, then I am coming with you." "Absolutely not. You are what they want. I am not giving them the opportunity to grab you. And I am not sitting here helplessly while you risk your life for me. We are in this together, Owen." They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Owen shook his head. "You are stubborn as a mule, you know that. I am a survivor." "There is a difference." In the end, they compromised. Catherine would come with him but would stay hidden a safe distance away while he confronted the men. If anything went wrong, she would run for the horse and head to Silver Cliff as he had instructed. They moved through the forest in silence, Owen leading the way with Catherine following close behind. She was amazed at how quietly he moved, how he seemed to know exactly where to place each foot to avoid snapping twigs or rustling leaves. He had become a part of this wilderness, reading it like others read books. They approached the camp from downwind, creeping to within 50 yards before Owen signaled Catherine to stop. He positioned her behind a large boulder that provided both cover and a clear escape route, then squeezed her shoulder once before moving forward. Catherine watched as Owen walked openly into the camp, his hands resting casually near his weapons. The 2 men jumped up, reaching for their guns, but Owen's calm demeanor seemed to give them pause. "Morning, gentlemen," Owen said, his voice carrying clearly to where Catherine hid. "Nice spot you have here. Good view of the valley." The 2 men exchanged glances. They were rough-looking characters, unshaven and hard-eyed. The taller of the 2, a man with a scar across his cheek, spoke first. "This is a free country. We can camp wherever we want." "True enough," Owen agreed. "But see, this is my land you are on. I own everything from the creek south to the old pine grove, so technically you are trespassing." "We did not see any signs," the shorter man said. "That is because I do not believe in signs. I believe in neighborly communication. And right now, I am communicating that you need to move along." The scarred man stepped forward, his hand hovering over his revolver. "We hear there is a woman hiding around here. Dark hair, pretty face. Someone in town said they saw you buying extra supplies at the general store. Makes a man wonder if maybe you are harboring a fugitive." "What a man wonders is his own business," Owen said, his tone still conversational but with an edge now. "But what a man does on my property is mine, and I am telling you both to pack up and leave." "Or what?" the shorter man challenged. "There are 2 of us and 1 of you." Owen's smile was cold. "That hardly seems fair. Maybe you should have brought more men." What happened next was almost too fast for Catherine to follow. The scarred man went for his gun, and Owen moved like lightning. His revolver was out and firing before the other man's weapon had cleared leather. The shot took the scarred man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The shorter man froze, his hand on his gun but clearly reconsidering his choices. "The next shot will not be in the shoulder," Owen said quietly. "Leave your weapons and go. Tell Marcus Denton that Catherine Walker is under my protection, and anyone who comes after her will get the same treatment." "No, scratch that. Anyone else who comes will get worse. I am feeling generous today." The shorter man helped his wounded companion up, and they stumbled away from the camp, leaving their weapons behind. Owen watched until they disappeared into the trees, then quickly gathered their guns and supplies before returning to where Catherine waited. "Are you all right?" she asked, emerging from behind the boulder. Her legs were shaking with reaction. "Fine." They were amateurs trying to intimidate rather than fight. He looked at the guns he had collected. "But they will go back to Denton and report. This is not over, Catherine. It is just beginning." They returned to the cabin quickly, both of them on high alert. Once inside with the door secured, Catherine found herself shaking in earnest. Owen guided her to a chair and pressed a cup of whiskey into her hands. "Drink," he ordered. "It will help with the shock." Catherine obeyed, the liquid burning down her throat. "You could have been killed," she said, looking up at him. "Owen, you could have died because of me. But I did not." He knelt in front of her chair, his gray eyes intense. "Listen to me. I meant what I said to those men. You are under my protection. That is not something I say lightly. Where I come from, a man's word is his bond. I have given you my word, and I will not break it, no matter the cost." "But why?" Catherine whispered. "We barely know each other." Owen reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch incredibly tender despite his rough hands. "Maybe we have not known each other long," he said softly. "But I know you, Catherine Walker. I know your courage, your kindness, your strength. I know that you make this cabin feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. I know that when I am out scouting and I think about coming back here, it is not the cabin I am looking forward to seeing. It is you." Catherine's breath caught. She set down the whiskey and reached out, covering Owen's hand with her own where it rested on the arm of the chair. "Owen, I do not know what is happening between us, but I feel it too. Every day I spend with you, I see more of who you really are. You are not just a lonely frontiersman hiding in the mountains. You are a good man, a brave man, someone who stands up for what is right even when it is dangerous. I am also a man who has feelings for you that I probably should not have," Owen admitted. "You are educated, refined from the city. I am a wilderness hermit who barely knows which fork to use at a proper dinner table." Catherine laughed, despite the tension of the moment. "I have been eating with my fingers for the past few days and have never been happier. Owen, where you come from and what you know about dinner forks do not matter to me. What matters is who you are in here." She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady beneath her palm. Owen covered her hand with his own, holding it against his chest. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. When I said I would protect you no matter the cost, I meant it. But you need to understand what that might mean. If Denton sends more men, and I think he will, there is going to be violence. Real violence. I have killed men before, during the war and after. I am not proud of it, but I will not hesitate to do it again if it means keeping you safe. I need to know if you can accept that about me." Catherine thought about his question carefully. A week ago, the idea of violence would have horrified her. But that was before she had been hunted like an animal, before she had learned that there were men in the world who would kill her without a second thought. Owen was not like those men. He was not cruel or sadistic. He was simply a man willing to do what was necessary to protect those he cared about. "I accept all of you," she said finally. "The gentle man who gave me his bed and the dangerous man who faced down those two thugs this morning. Both are part of who you are, and I would not change either." Something in Owen's expression shifted, a wall coming down that Catherine had not even realized was there. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, almost hesitant, as if Owen was afraid of overwhelming her. But Catherine leaned into it, her hand sliding up to cup his rough jaw, and the kiss deepened. There was warmth and promise in it, a wordless communication of feelings that were growing too strong to deny. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Owen rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I never expected this," he murmured. "I thought I would live alone in these mountains until the day I died. Then you came crashing into my life, and suddenly alone does not seem appealing anymore." "I never expected this either," Catherine admitted, "but I am glad it happened. Whatever comes next, I am glad I found you, Owen Ramsey." They spent the rest of the day preparing for what they both knew was coming. Owen checked and rechecked their defenses, positioning extra weapons around the cabin, ensuring they had enough water and supplies to withstand a siege if necessary. Catherine helped where she could, her fear tempered by determination. She would not be a helpless victim. If men came for her, she would fight alongside Owen. That night they sat together by the fire, Owen's arm around Catherine's shoulders as she leaned against him. It felt natural and right, as if they had been doing this for years instead of days. They talked about the future, carefully avoiding discussing the immediate danger in favor of imagining a time when it was past. "If we get through this," Owen said slowly, "and if you still want to teach, there are towns springing up all over Colorado that need schools. You could start fresh somewhere, build a new life." "What about you?" Catherine asked. "Would you stay in these mountains?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "I thought I wanted to be alone forever," he said finally, "but you have shown me what I was missing. If you would want it, I could see myself living in town, being part of a community again, as long as I was with you." Catherine turned to look up at him, her heart swelling at the vulnerability in his eyes. "Is that a proposal, Owen Ramsey?" "Not yet," he said with a slight smile. "When I propose to you, Catherine Walker, it will be proper. Down on one knee with a ring, when you are not in danger and can think clearly about whether you really want to tie yourself to a reformed mountain man." "I already know my answer," Catherine said softly. "Ask me anyway when the time comes. I want to do this right." They kissed again, and this time there was more heat in it, more promise of things to come. But Owen pulled back before things could progress too far. "You deserve better than a rushed coupling while danger lurks outside," he said, though his voice was rough with restrained desire. "When I make love to you for the first time, it will be in safety, in our own bed, with all the time in the world." Catherine was frustrated by his restraint even as she appreciated the respect behind it. "You are a gentleman, Owen Ramsey, even if you try to hide it." "I am a man in love," he corrected, "and I want everything to be right for you." The words sent a thrill through Catherine. He loved her. This strong, complicated, wonderful man loved her. "I love you too," she whispered. They held each other through the night, dozing but never fully sleeping, both of them aware that their respite was temporary. The attack came 2 days later, just before dawn. Catherine woke to Owen's hand over her mouth and his whispered voice in her ear. "They are here. Stay down." She could hear them outside, at least half a dozen men surrounding the cabin. Her heart hammered as Owen moved to his position by the window, rifle in hand. He had spent yesterday afternoon preparing for this, fortifying the cabin's defenses and positioning himself where he would have the best field of fire. A voice called out from the darkness. "Owen Ramsey, we know you are in there. Send out Catherine Walker and we will let you live. Resist, and we will burn you out." Owen did not respond, his eyes scanning the darkness for targets. Catherine crouched behind the overturned table they had positioned for cover, a revolver clutched in her sweating hands. Owen had taught her to shoot the day before, and while she was no sharpshooter, she could at least defend herself if needed. "This is your last warning, Ramsey," the voice shouted. In response, Owen fired a shot that took the hat off the man who had been speaking. "And that is yours," he called back. "Leave now, or the next shot will not miss." For a moment there was confused shouting outside. Then gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes blooming in the pre-dawn darkness. Owen returned fire methodically, his shots careful and well-aimed despite the chaos. Catherine heard screams as at least 2 of his bullets found targets. But there were too many of them, and they were well armed. Bullets thudded into the cabin's log walls, shattered the windows, sent splinters flying through the air. Catherine pressed herself against the floor, praying desperately for Owen's safety. Then she smelled smoke. They were trying to burn them out after all. Owen cursed and fired several more shots, then grabbed Catherine's hand. "The root cellar," he said. "Now." He pulled back a bearskin rug, revealing a trapdoor. Catherine had not even known it was there. Owen yanked it open and practically threw her down the ladder into the darkness below. He followed quickly, pulling the door shut above them just as part of the cabin's roof caught fire. The root cellar was small and dark, barely large enough for both of them. But Owen had prepared here too. He lit a small lantern, revealing a narrow tunnel leading away from the cabin. "I dug this last year as an escape route," he explained. "Thought I was being paranoid. Turns out I was being smart." They crawled through the tunnel, the sound of fire and shouting growing distant above them. Catherine's dress caught and tore, dirt got in her hair and mouth, but she kept moving. Behind her, Owen urged her forward. The tunnel emerged in a thick stand of pines about 50 yards from the cabin. Owen carefully pushed aside the brush concealing the entrance and peered out. "They are all focused on the cabin," he whispered. "We can make it to the lean-to and get the horse." They ran, staying low, using the trees and pre-dawn darkness for cover. Behind them, Catherine heard men shouting as they realized their prey had escaped. But Owen knew these woods, knew every trail and hiding place. He led her unerringly to the small structure where he kept his horse, a sturdy buckskin mare. There was no time for a saddle. Owen boosted Catherine onto the horse's bare back, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her as he grabbed the mane. And then they were moving, the horse galloping through the forest with sure-footed confidence despite the darkness. Shots rang out behind them, but they were firing blind, and the thick trees provided cover. Within minutes, the sounds of pursuit faded. Owen did not slow down, though, pushing the mare hard as they climbed into the higher mountains. Dawn was breaking when Owen finally slowed the horse to a walk. They were high up now, the air thin and cold. Catherine was shaking, from cold and shock and delayed fear. Owen felt her trembling and pulled her more tightly against him, sharing his warmth. "Where are we going?" she asked. "There is an old mining camp about 3 miles from here. It was abandoned years ago, but the structures are still sound. We can hide there while I figure out our next move." His voice was grim. "My home is gone, Catherine, everything I had." "I am so sorry," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "Owen, this is all my fault. You have lost everything because of me." "No." His voice was firm. "I lost a cabin and some possessions, material things that can be replaced, but I gained you, and that is worth more than anything I left behind." They reached the mining camp as the sun fully rose. It consisted of several dilapidated buildings and the entrance to a played-out silver mine. Owen chose the most intact structure, a small bunkhouse that still had a roof and intact walls. He helped Catherine down from the horse, then took care of the exhausted mare, rubbing her down and letting her drink from a nearby stream. Inside the bunkhouse, Catherine finally broke down, sobbing with exhaustion and guilt and fear. Owen held her, letting her cry it out, murmuring reassurances that she barely heard. "We cannot keep running," she finally said, her voice raw. "Owen, this has to end. I cannot let you keep sacrificing everything for me." "Then we end it," Owen said. His jaw was set with determination. "No more hiding. We go on the offensive." "What do you mean?" "I mean we do not wait for the marshal to respond. We do not wait for Denton to send more men. We go to Denver and we make him answer for his crimes." Catherine pulled back to look at him. "Owen, that is suicide." "You said yourself he has politicians and lawmen in his pocket. If we walk into Denver, we will be arrested or killed. Not if we are smart about it. Not if we have help." Owen stood and began to pace, his mind clearly working. "I know people in Denver, people who owe me favors from my time there. There are honest lawmen, too, ones who have not been corrupted by Denton's money. And there are newspapers. If we can get your story published, if we can expose what Denton has done in a way that cannot be covered up, we can force the authorities to act. That is a big if." "Do you have a better idea?" Catherine thought about it. They could keep running, keep hiding, but eventually Denton would find them. His reach was too long, his resources too vast. Or they could fight, take the battle to him, try to end this once and for all. "All right," she said finally. "We go to Denver. But Owen, if things go wrong, if it looks like Denton is going to win, I want you to save yourself. Do not die for me." Owen knelt in front of her and took both her hands in his. "Catherine Walker, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. These past days with you have been worth more than the 5 years before them. So no, I will not save myself and leave you behind. We win together or we fall together. That is not negotiable." Catherine leaned forward and kissed him fiercely. "Then we had better make sure we win." They spent the day at the mining camp, resting and planning. Owen had a small stash of supplies hidden in the mine itself, including money and extra ammunition. He had been preparing for trouble for years, even if he had not known what form it would take. As night fell, they ate a cold supper of jerky and hardtack, not daring to light a fire that might give away their position. Tomorrow they would begin the dangerous journey to Denver, but tonight they had this moment of peace. Catherine sat with her back against Owen's chest, his arms wrapped around her as they looked out at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. "Tell me about the life you imagine for us," she said softly. "After this is over." Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. "I imagine a small house, nothing fancy but comfortable and warm. Maybe on the edge of a town where we can be part of the community but still have space to breathe. You would teach at the local school, inspiring another generation of children. I could work as a guide or a scout, or maybe start a small ranch. In the evenings, we would sit together just like this, talking about our day. And maybe, if we are blessed, there would be children. A son with your clever mind and a daughter with my stubbornness." Catherine smiled. "That sounds like heaven. What about you? What do you imagine?" "The same, mostly. Though I think our daughter would have your stubbornness and our son would have my temper, just to keep things interesting." She laced her fingers through his. "I imagine waking up next to you every morning, knowing that I am safe and loved. I imagine building a life together, facing whatever challenges come our way as a team. I imagine growing old with you, Owen, watching our grandchildren play while we sit on the porch and remember when we were young and foolish." "We are still young and foolish," Owen pointed out. "Then imagine we survive long enough to become old and wise. Deal." They held each other as the temperature dropped, neither wanting to move and break the spell of this moment. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them, and they slept curled together on the bunkhouse floor, wrapped in a single blanket Owen had retrieved from his hidden supplies. Catherine woke to Owen gently shaking her shoulder. "Time to go," he said softly. "We want to reach Denver by tomorrow evening, which means we need to cover a lot of ground today." The journey to Denver took 2 hard days of riding. They avoided towns and settlements, living on jerky and whatever water they could find. Owen pushed them hard but not recklessly, aware that they needed to arrive in condition to fight, not exhausted beyond usefulness. As they drew closer to the city, Catherine felt her anxiety growing. Denver was Denton's territory, his stronghold. Walking in there felt like walking into the lion's den, but Owen seemed confident, his plan taking shape as they rode. "We will go see Jacob Turner first," Owen explained as the city came into view on the evening of the second day. "He is a newspaperman, runs the Denver Tribune. He has been trying to expose corruption in the city for years, but he has never had enough evidence to take down someone as powerful as Denton. If we can give him your eyewitness testimony plus some hard evidence, he will run with the story." "What kind of hard evidence?" Catherine asked. "The kind we are going to steal from Denton's office tonight." Catherine nearly fell off the horse. "You want to break into Marcus Denton's office? Owen, that is insane." "Probably," he agreed cheerfully. "But it is also the last thing he will expect. He thinks we are on the run, hiding somewhere in the mountains. He will not be expecting us to walk right into his territory and rob him." They entered Denver as darkness fell, two dusty travelers on a tired horse. No one gave them a second glance in the busy streets. Owen led them to a modest boarding house on the edge of town, run by an elderly widow he knew from his time living in the city. Mrs. Harriet Grayson was delighted to see Owen and asked no questions when he introduced Catherine as his fiancée. She gave them a room and promised to have a hot bath drawn for Catherine, bless her heart. While Catherine soaked in the blissful hot water, washing away days of dirt and fear, Owen went out to make contact with his people. He returned an hour later with a satisfied expression. "Jacob Turner will meet with us tomorrow morning at his office," Owen reported. "And I have located Denton's office and home. He keeps records at both locations, but the office is less heavily guarded. We will break in tomorrow night after we have talked to Turner." "Owen, even if we get evidence, what is to stop Denton from having us killed before the story can be published?" "Nothing," Owen admitted. "Which is why we will need to disappear for a few days after we give Turner the evidence. Let him publish the story and create enough public outcry that killing us would be too risky even for Denton." It was a dangerous plan with a dozen ways it could go wrong, but Catherine could not think of a better alternative. They were committed now. The next morning, they met with Jacob Turner in his cluttered office above the print shop. Turner was a thin man in his 50s with ink-stained fingers and sharp, intelligent eyes. He listened to Catherine's story without interrupting, making notes as she described the murder she had witnessed in detail. "This is explosive," Turner said when she finished. "If you can testify to this, and if we can find corroborating evidence, it could bring down Denton's entire operation. But Miss Walker, you realize this puts you in tremendous danger. Denton has killed to keep this secret before. He will not hesitate to kill again." "I know," Catherine said steadily, "but I am tired of running. It is time someone stood up to him." Turner looked at Owen. "And you are willing to help her do this?" "I am willing to do whatever it takes to keep her safe and see justice done," Owen replied. Turner nodded slowly. "All right, here is what I propose. You get me documents from Denton's office, anything that shows his financial dealings or connections to criminal activity. Meanwhile, I will start laying the groundwork for the story. I have contacts who can protect you once the story breaks, federal authorities who have been waiting for a chance to move against Denton. If we do this right, he will not have time to retaliate before he is in custody." "And if we do not do this right?" Catherine asked. "Then we all end up dead," Turner said bluntly. "But I have been trying to bring down men like Denton for 20 years. This is the best chance I have ever had. I am willing to take the risk if you are." They spent the rest of the day planning. Turner provided them with a map of Denton's office building and information about his security arrangements. Owen studied it all carefully, his expression thoughtful. That evening, as they prepared for the break-in, Catherine found herself thinking about how far she had come. 2 weeks ago, she had been a frightened woman running for her life. Now she was about to break into a criminal's office to steal evidence. If someone had told her she would do this, she would have laughed at the impossibility. But she had changed. Owen had changed her. He had shown her that she was stronger than she knew, braver than she believed. And together, they were going to bring down Marcus Denton. They approached Denton's office building well after midnight when the streets were nearly empty. The building was a 3-story structure in the business district, elegant and respectable looking. Owen had learned that Denton kept his office on the 3rd floor, and there were night watchmen patrolling the ground floor. "We go in through the roof," Owen whispered, leading Catherine to the neighboring building. They climbed the fire escape quietly, then crossed to Denton's building via a narrow gap. Catherine tried not to look down at the street far below as she made the jump, trusting Owen to catch her if she slipped. The roof access door was locked, but Owen made short work of it with a pick he had acquired somewhere. They descended the stairs carefully, alert for any sound of guards. Denton's office door was also locked, but again, Owen's skills proved sufficient. Inside, the office was plush and expensively furnished. Owen immediately went to the large desk and began searching through the drawers while Catherine kept watch. After several tense minutes, he let out a soft exclamation of triumph. "Found it," he whispered, holding up a leather-bound ledger. "Financial records going back 3 years. If Turner is right, this should show payments to corrupt officials, transactions related to stolen gold, everything we need." "Take it and let us go," Catherine urged, her nerves screaming. But Owen was already searching through other documents, stuffing papers into a satchel he had brought. "Just a few more minutes. I want to make sure we have everything." That was when they heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, purposeful footsteps coming toward the office. Catherine and Owen exchanged a panicked glance. They were trapped. Owen made a quick decision. He grabbed Catherine's hand and pulled her toward the window. "Out," he whispered urgently. The window opened onto a narrow ledge that ran along the outside of the building. Catherine looked at it in horror. The ledge was barely 6 inches wide and they were 3 stories up. But the footsteps were getting closer and there was no other option. Owen went first, moving onto the ledge with the confidence of someone who had spent years navigating mountain trails. He held out his hand to Catherine. "Trust me," he said. Catherine took his hand and stepped out onto the ledge. The wind immediately tried to tear her away from the building, and she pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Owen moved along the ledge, Catherine following, their backs pressed against the brick. They heard the office door open behind them, heard an angry exclamation as someone discovered the broken lock, but they were around the corner now, out of sight. Owen led them to a window that was propped open slightly. He pushed it up just enough for them to slip through, and they tumbled into what appeared to be a storage room. They did not wait to see if they had been followed. Owen grabbed Catherine's hand, and they ran down the back stairs, emerging into an alley behind the building. Shouts erupted behind them as they fled into the night, losing themselves in the maze of Denver's streets. They did not stop running until they reached a small park on the other side of the city, both of them gasping for breath. Owen pulled the satchel around and checked its contents. The ledger and documents were intact, if somewhat crumpled. "We did it," Catherine said, laughing with relief and residual terror. "Owen, we actually did it." He grinned at her, looking younger and more carefree than she had ever seen him. "We make a good team, you and I." A team of criminals, apparently. I just burgled an office and fled across a 3-story ledge. My aunt would be horrified. Your aunt is not here, but I am, and I am very proud of you. Owen pulled her close and kissed her, heedless of who might see. Catherine kissed him back, dizzy with success and love and the sheer joy of being alive. They returned to the boarding house and spent the rest of the night going through the documents with Jacob Turner, who they roused from sleep with their discovery. His eyes grew wider as he read through the ledger, seeing evidence of bribes paid to city officials, judges, and lawmen. There were records of gold stolen from legitimate claims, of murders ordered and paid for, of a criminal empire that extended throughout the territory. "This is incredible," Turner said, his voice awed. "With this and Miss Walker's testimony, Denton is finished. I can have this story ready to print by tomorrow evening." "How quickly can you get it distributed?" Owen asked. "The Tribune has the largest circulation in Denver." "By the morning after we print, every household in the city will know what Marcus Denton has done. And I will immediately send copies to federal authorities and newspapers in other cities. Even if Denton tries to suppress it here, the story will spread." They finalized the details of the story with Turner, Catherine providing a full written statement about the murder she had witnessed. By the time the sun rose, everything was in place. Turner would print the story in tomorrow evening's edition. In the meantime, Owen and Catherine needed to hide somewhere Denton could not reach them. Mrs. Grayson, bless her heart, offered her root cellar as a hiding place. It was cool and dark and musty, but it was safe. Owen and Catherine descended into it as the city woke up around them, trusting that Turner would do his part while they waited. The hours crawled by. Catherine dozed fitfully, her head on Owen's shoulder as they sat on sacks of potatoes in the darkness. They talked in whispers, making plans for the future for after this was all over. "I want to marry you as soon as possible," Owen said. "I do not want to wait. I have wasted enough of my life being alone." "I want that too," Catherine agreed. "But Owen, are you sure about leaving your mountains?" "I know how much they mean to you." "They meant something when I had nothing else," Owen said. "But now I have you and you mean more. Wherever we end up, as long as we are together, that will be home." Catherine kissed him softly. "I love you, Owen Ramsey. More than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too, Catherine Walker. You are the bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known." They held each other in the darkness, drawing strength from each other as they waited for the story to break. Mrs. Grayson came down that evening with food and news. "The Tribune just hit the streets," she reported excitedly. "There are people everywhere reading it, and they are furious. I heard 3 different groups talking about how Denton needs to be arrested. The sheriff has already announced he is opening an investigation." Owen and Catherine exchanged hopeful glances. It was working. The public outcry was exactly what they had hoped for. Now they just had to wait for the authorities to act, but Denton did not wait for the authorities. That night, as Owen and Catherine were preparing to try to get some sleep in their uncomfortable hiding place, they heard commotion upstairs. Mrs. Grayson's voice, shrill with fear. Heavy footsteps. Furniture being overturned. Owen was on his feet instantly, his hand on his gun. "They found us," he said grimly. "How?" Catherine whispered. "Does not matter. What matters is getting you out of here alive." But there was nowhere to go. The root cellar had only one entrance, and it led directly into the house where Denton's men were searching. They were trapped like rats. Owen looked around desperately, then grabbed Catherine's hand. "The coal chute," he said, pointing to a small opening in the wall near the ceiling. "It is our only chance." The coal chute was barely large enough for a person to squeeze through, and it had not been used in years. But Owen boosted Catherine up to it, and she squirmed through, tearing her dress and scraping her arms on the rough wood. Owen followed, larger and having a harder time, but he made it through just as they heard the root cellar door opening behind them. They emerged into the alley behind the boarding house, covered in coal dust and breathing hard. Shouts erupted behind them as Denton's men realized their prey had escaped. Owen grabbed Catherine's hand, and they ran. This time they headed for the newspaper office, figuring Turner would have helped there, people who could protect them. But as they rounded the corner onto Main Street, they found themselves face to face with Marcus Denton himself. He was a well-dressed man in his 40s with cold eyes and a cruel smile. He had 6 men with him, all armed. There was no way Owen and Catherine could fight their way through all of them. "Miss Walker," Denton said smoothly, "you have caused me a great deal of trouble, and you, Mr. Ramsey. I am impressed by your resourcefulness, but it ends now." Owen stepped in front of Catherine, his hand on his gun. "It is over, Denton. The whole city knows what you have done. Killing us now will not change that." "Perhaps not," Denton agreed, "but it will certainly make me feel better." His men raised their weapons, and Catherine knew they were about to die. She pressed herself against Owen's back, wanting to be touching him at the end, grateful that at least they would die together. Then a voice rang out from down the street. "United States Marshal, nobody move." Catherine looked up to see a man in a federal marshal's badge striding toward them, backed by a dozen armed deputies. Behind him came Jacob Turner, looking triumphant. "Marcus Denton," the marshal said, "you are under arrest for murder, conspiracy, bribery of federal officials, and about a dozen other charges. Drop your weapons." For a long moment, Denton looked like he might resist. His men shifted nervously, clearly trying to decide if loyalty to their boss was worth dying for. Then Denton's shoulders slumped, and he raised his hands in surrender. "Smart choice," the marshal said. He gestured to his deputies, who moved forward to disarm and restrain Denton and his men. Then the marshal turned to Owen and Catherine. "You two must be the ones who provided Turner with his evidence. Well done. That took real courage." Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief, and only Owen's arm around her waist kept her upright. It was over. They had won. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Catherine testified before a federal grand jury about the murder she had witnessed. The ledger and documents Owen had stolen provided evidence of a criminal conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Colorado's territorial government. Several officials resigned in disgrace, while others were arrested alongside Denton. The trial was swift. With the overwhelming evidence against him and Catherine's compelling testimony, Denton was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to hang, though that would be appealed for years. But he was finished, his power broken, his criminal empire dismantled through it all. Owen stayed by Catherine's side. He testified about the attacks on his cabin, about how Denton's men had hunted them across the territory. His simple, honest demeanor won over the jury and public alike. Newspapers called him a hero, which made him deeply uncomfortable. "I am not a hero," he told Catherine after yet another reporter tried to interview him. "I just did what anyone should have done." "Most men would have turned me away that first night," Catherine pointed out. "You risked everything for a stranger. That is the definition of heroism, Owen." When the trial finally concluded, they were free at last. Free from fear, free from danger, free to build the life they had dreamed about in whispered conversations and stolen moments. Owen proposed properly, on one knee in the park where they had celebrated stealing Denton's ledger. He had bought a simple gold ring with a small sapphire, apologizing that he could not afford anything grander. Catherine cried and said yes before he had even finished asking. They were married a month later in a small ceremony at the church in Westcliffe. Mrs. Grayson came down from Denver to attend, as did Jacob Turner and several of the deputies who had helped arrest Denton. It was a simple affair, but it was perfect. Catherine wore a new dress, her first nice dress in months, and Owen wore a suit that he clearly felt uncomfortable in. But when he looked at her walking down the aisle, the love in his eyes made him the most handsome man she had ever seen. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Owen kissed her to cheers from the small crowd. They celebrated with a meal at the town's hotel, then left for the cabin Owen had purchased just outside Westcliffe. It was not the cabin in the mountains that had been burned, but it was close. Owen had used the reward money from the federal government for helping bring down Denton to buy a small piece of land with a sturdy cabin and room to expand. It overlooked a valley with a view that made Catherine catch her breath every time she saw it. Their wedding night was everything Owen had promised. Gentle and passionate, unhurried and perfect. They had all the time in the world now, and they used it to explore each other, to express with touch and whisper what words could not fully capture. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in their marriage bed, Catherine traced her fingers over the scars on Owen's chest. "Tell me about them," she said softly. So he did, sharing stories of his past that he had never told anyone. The war, the wandering years after, the loneliness that had driven him into the mountains. And Catherine shared her own stories, the grief of losing her parents, the struggle to make her way in a world that had little use for orphaned girls, the determination that had driven her to become a teacher. They fell asleep holding each other as the moon rose over the mountains, two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to face the future together. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm over the following months. Catherine took a position teaching at the Westcliffe School, her classroom filled with eager students hungry for knowledge. Owen worked as a guide and scout, his skills in demand from surveyors and prospectors exploring the region. In the evenings, they would sit together on their porch, talking about their day, making plans for the future. A year after their marriage, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. Owen was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective to the point of being overbearing. Catherine found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. "I am not made of glass," she told him when he insisted on carrying her to the porch for the third time that week. "I can walk perfectly well." "I know," Owen said, setting her down gently, "but I like carrying you. Makes me feel useful." Their son was born on a snowy January evening, coming into the world with a lusty cry that suggested he had inherited his father's strength and his mother's determination. They named him James after Owen's father, and he had Catherine's dark hair and Owen's gray eyes. Owen held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his weathered face, this hard man completely undone by the tiny life in his arms. "Hello, James," he whispered. "I promise to protect you and teach you and love you every day of your life." Catherine watched them, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was the life they had dreamed about in a root cellar hiding from killers, the future they had hoped for but barely dared to believe would come true. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, red-faced and stubborn from the start. They named her Rose, and she completed their family. Owen proved to be a wonderful father, patient and kind but firm when needed. He taught James to track animals through the forest and shoot straight. He braided Rose's hair and read her stories by the fireplace. Catherine continued teaching, now balancing her work with motherhood. The community embraced them both, recognizing what good people they were. Owen was elected to the town council, despite his protests that he was not a political man. Catherine started a lending library in the school, sharing her love of books with everyone who wanted to learn. As the years passed, Westcliffe grew and prospered. The railroad came through, bringing new opportunities and new people. But Owen and Catherine's cabin remained their sanctuary, a place where they could escape the bustle of town life and just be together. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Catherine riding up into the mountains, back to the area where his original cabin had stood. The land had healed, new growth covering the scars of the fire. They stood together looking out over the valley, hand in hand. "You ever regret how things turned out?" Catherine asked. "If I had not knocked on your door that night, you would still have your solitude, your simple life." Owen turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "My life before you was not living, Catherine. It was just existing, one empty day after another. You gave me purpose, gave me love, gave me a family. If I could go back and change things, the only thing I would change is finding you sooner." Catherine kissed him, tasting the truth of his words. "I love you, Owen Ramsey, more now than even on the day I married you. I love you too, Catherine Ramsey, and I will keep loving you until the day I die and probably beyond that too." They rode back down the mountain as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. At home, their children waited, along with the life they had built together from the ashes of danger and fear. The years continued to roll by. James grew into a tall, serious young man who shared his father's love of the wilderness. At 18, he took a position as a junior guide, following in Owen's footsteps. Rose, at 16, showed her mother's passion for learning and announced her intention to become a teacher herself. Owen's hair turned gray at the temples, and his face gained new lines, but he remained strong and vital. Catherine's beauty matured into something deeper, the wisdom of years adding to her natural grace. They faced challenges, as all couples do. Years when money was tight, illnesses that scared them, disagreements about how to raise the children. But through it all, their love remained the foundation everything else was built upon. Marcus Denton had died in prison years earlier, his final appeal denied. His death barely registered with Owen and Catherine. He was a nightmare from the past, powerless to touch their present. They had won not just by surviving, but by building something beautiful from the darkness he had tried to destroy them with. On their 25th anniversary, the entire town threw them a celebration. Jacob Turner came down from Denver, now retired but still writing the occasional editorial. Mrs. Grayson, elderly but spry, made the journey as well. There were speeches and toasts, stories shared about the famous case that had brought down a criminal empire. But the moment Catherine treasured most came late that night, after all the guests had left and they were alone in their cabin. Owen built up the fire and pulled her into his arms, and they danced to music only they could hear, moving slowly around the room where they had spent so many happy years. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, his voice rumbling in his chest against her ear. About a terrified woman pounding on a stranger's door, begging for help. About a lonely man who chose courage over caution. About how one moment of decision changed everything. "Best decision I ever made," Owen said, "opening that door to you. Best decision I ever made was trusting you to keep me safe." "Did I keep you safe?" Catherine pulled back to look up at him, seeing the man she loved more than life itself. "You kept me safer than safe, Owen. You gave me a home, a family, a life worth living. You gave me everything." Owen's eyes glistened in the firelight. "You gave me the same, Catherine. You saved me just as surely as I saved you." They stood together in the warm cabin, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life. Photographs of their children on the walls, books on the shelves, Owen's rifle still mounted above the door. It was a good life, rich in all the ways that mattered. As they grew older still, they spent more time on their porch, watching the mountains change with the seasons. James married and gave them grandchildren, three rowdy boys who loved visiting Grandpa's cabin and hearing stories about the old days. Rose became a teacher as she had planned, eventually taking over Catherine's position at the school. Owen and Catherine's love became something of a legend in Westcliffe. Young couples would point to them as proof that true love existed, that romance did not fade with time but deepened and grew richer. People would ask them the secret to their long, happy marriage. "No secret," Owen would say with a smile. "Just finding the right person and choosing them every day, even when it is hard." "Especially when it is hard," Catherine would add. "Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice, an action, a commitment you renew every morning." When Owen was 72, he fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor worried he might not recover, given his age, but Catherine refused to accept that possibility. She nursed him day and night, refusing to leave his bedside, bullying him back to health through sheer force of will. "You are not allowed to die yet," she told him fiercely when he protested that she should rest. "We have at least another 20 years together, Owen Ramsey, and I will not hear any argument about it." Owen recovered, as he always did when Catherine set her mind to something. "You are a terror, woman," he told her affectionately. "Have I mentioned that I love you?" "Once or twice," Catherine replied, "but I never get tired of hearing it." They made it to their 50th anniversary, a milestone that called for another town celebration. Their children and grandchildren gathered, and the new generation of Westcliffe residents came to honor the elderly couple who had become pillars of the community. At the party, Owen stood up to make a toast. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, but his gray eyes were still as sharp as they had been the day Catherine first saw them. "50 years ago," he began, his voice still strong despite his age, "a woman knocked on my door asking for shelter from danger. I was a solitary man, content with my isolation, or so I thought, but Catherine Walker crashed into my life like a summer storm, and nothing was ever the same." He turned to look at his wife, his expression tender. "You gave me purpose, Catherine. You gave me joy. You gave me a reason to live instead of just survive. Every day with you has been a gift, even the hard days, even the days we fought or struggled or worried. Because we faced it all together, and that made all the difference." Catherine rose and crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "And you, Owen Ramsey, you became the danger to anyone who threatened me, just as you promised that first night. But you also became my safety, my home, my heart. I thought I was looking for shelter from danger, but what I found was so much more. I found my other half, the person I was meant to spend my life with." They kissed to thunderous applause, and if both had tears streaming down their weathered faces, no one mentioned it. Some moments are too sacred for words. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. Catherine beside him as she had been for over half a century. He died in the cabin they had shared, in the bed they had slept in together, holding the hand of the woman he loved more than life itself. Catherine grieved, as was natural and right. But she did not fall apart because Owen had taught her strength, had shown her that she was braver than she knew. She lived another 5 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, teaching one more generation of students, tending the grave where Owen rested overlooking the mountains he had loved. When Catherine's time came, she was ready. Her last words were about Owen, about how she was looking forward to seeing him again, to dancing one more time to music only they could hear. She died with a smile on her face, and those who loved her took comfort in the belief that she and Owen were together again, in whatever comes after. They were buried side by side on the hillside, their graves marked with a simple stone that read, "Owen and Catherine Ramsey." She asked for shelter, he gave her a home. two souls who found each other and built something beautiful from ashes and fear. The cabin remained in the family, passed down through the generations. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, people swore they could see two figures on the porch, sitting close together, watching the sun set over the mountains they had loved. Just a trick of the light, of course. But a comforting one. A reminder that true love does not end with death, but echoes on through the years, inspiring and uplifting all who hear the story. The story of Catherine Walker and Owen Ramsey became part of Colorado's history, a tale told to illustrate the wildness and romance of the frontier days. But for those who knew them, who had seen their love firsthand, it was more than just a story. It was proof that even in the darkest times, even when hunted and afraid, it is possible to find love, to find courage, to find home. And that lesson, that truth, survived long after the frontier was tamed and Westcliffe grew from a small mining town into a thriving community. The Ramsey name remained respected, their descendants carrying forward the values of courage and integrity that Owen and Catherine had exemplified. In the end, what had begun with a desperate woman pounding on a stranger's door became a legacy of love that spanned generations. Catherine had asked for shelter from danger, and Owen had become the danger to anyone who threatened her. But more than that, he had become her partner, her love, her home. And together, they had proven that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the moments we least expect, from choices made in crisis that echo through the years in ways we cannot imagine. Their story was complete, their journey finished. And it was, in every way that mattered, a life well lived and a love well earned.